The winter night in Moscow had arrived early, as it often did in the cold months. Snow drifted slowly through the air, covering the streets, cars, and sidewalks with a thin white blanket. The icy wind whistled between the tall buildings, making the city feel even colder than usual. Streetlights glowed softly, reflecting on the frozen pavement and the piles of snow gathered along the road. Inside one of the modern glass office towers in the business district, the lights were finally turning off for the night. After a long day of meetings and phone calls, Daniel Carter stepped out of the building. He was a successful CEO, known for making tough decisions and leading a powerful company. But tonight he looked more like a tired father than a business leader. Standing beside him was his 6-year-old daughter, Lily Carter. She was bundled in a thick pink winter coat, a knitted hat with a fluffy pom-pom, and warm mittens that almost hid her tiny hands. Her cheeks were rosy from the cold, and little clouds of breath appeared every time she spoke. "Papa, look how much snow," Lily said excitedly, stretching out her mittened hands to catch the falling flakes. Daniel smiled faintly. "Looks like Moscow wants to turn into a giant snow globe tonight." They began walking toward the parking lot where Daniel's black car waited under a layer of fresh snow. The crunch of their boots echoed softly in the quiet street. Most people had already hurried home to warm apartments, leaving the sidewalks nearly empty. Lily walked close to her father, holding his hand tightly while telling him about her day at school, about the drawing she made, the story her teacher read, and how she wanted to build the biggest snowman in the world tomorrow. Daniel listened while unlocking his car with the remote. His mind was still partly stuck in work, numbers, contracts, and tomorrow's important meeting, but Lily's cheerful voice slowly pulled him back into the moment. Just as they were about to reach the car, Lily suddenly stopped walking. "Papa, wait." Daniel looked down, surprised. Lily wasn't smiling anymore. She was staring across the street toward a lonely park bench under a dim street light. There, wrapped in thin blankets, sat a young homeless woman. In her arms she held a tiny baby, trying desperately to shield it from the freezing wind. Lily's eyes filled with worry as she whispered softly, "Papa, her baby is freezing." The cold wind swept through the quiet street in Moscow, carrying tiny snowflakes that stung the skin. The park bench under the weak yellow streetlight looked even lonelier up close. The young homeless woman sat there trembling, her shoulders hunched as she tried to wrap the thin blanket tighter around the small baby in her arms. 6-year-old Lily Carter kept staring. Her bright, cheerful expression from a few minutes ago had disappeared, replaced by deep concern. "Papa, we can't just leave them," she said quietly. Before her father could answer, Lily gently slipped her hand out of the grasp of Daniel Carter and took a few careful steps toward the bench. The snow crunched softly under her small boots as she walked. "Lily, wait," Daniel started, but he stopped himself. The little girl stood in front of the woman and looked down at the baby. The infant's face was pale and tiny, barely visible under the thin blanket. The baby let out a weak cry that seemed almost lost in the cold night air. Lily's eyes filled with sympathy. Without hesitating, she unwound the warm knitted scarf from around her neck. The scarf was soft and bright, a gift from her grandmother, and it still held the warmth of her body. "Here," Lily said gently, stretching her small arms forward. "The baby needs this more than me." Carefully, she wrapped the scarf around the baby's blanket, tucking it around the tiny body to keep the warmth inside. The homeless woman looked stunned. Her tired eyes widened as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Thank you." Daniel slowly walked closer, watching the moment in silence. As a CEO, he was used to solving problems with money, contracts, and strategies. But what he saw now was something different. Pure kindness that required no plan at all. The woman adjusted the scarf around her baby, tears forming in her eyes. "I'm sorry you had to see this," she said quietly. "We lost our apartment last week. My husband left, and I didn't know where else to go." Daniel felt a heaviness in his chest. Lily looked up at her father with wide, hopeful eyes. "Papa, babies shouldn't sleep outside in the snow," she said softly. For a moment, Daniel said nothing. The cold wind blew past them again, and the baby whimpered quietly. Then Daniel slowly removed his thick wool coat and stepped forward. "You're right, Lily," he said gently. He placed the coat over the woman and her child. "No one should. The freezing wind continued to sweep through the streets of Moscow as snow quietly fell around them. The streetlight above the bench flickered slightly, casting a soft glow over the small group standing there. The young homeless mother held her baby closer, now wrapped in the warm coat that Daniel Carter had placed over them. The baby's crying had softened, and the extra warmth from Lily's scarf and Daniel's coat seemed to calm the tiny child. For a moment, no one spoke. Daniel stood silently, his breath visible in the cold air. His mind was racing, but not about company profits or board meetings like usual. Instead, he kept thinking about what his daughter had said. "Papa, babies shouldn't sleep outside in the snow." Beside him, Lily Carter looked up at him with hopeful eyes. She trusted him completely, as if she believed her father could fix any problem in the world. Daniel pulled out his phone. The homeless woman watched nervously, unsure what he was about to do. Many people had passed her that night, some looking away quickly, others pretending not to see her at all. Daniel dialed a number and waited. "Sergey?" he said when the call connected. "Yes, it's Daniel. I need a favor tonight." He stepped a little aside while he spoke, but Lily could still hear parts of the conversation. "Yes, a warm room, as soon as possible, and arrange some food too." A few minutes later, Daniel ended the call and walked back to the bench. "There's a small hotel a few blocks from here," he explained gently to the woman. "A room is waiting for you and your baby tonight." The woman stared at him in disbelief. A hotel?" she asked quietly. Daniel nodded. "Just somewhere warm for now." Tears rolled down the woman's cheeks as she held her baby close. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. Lily smiled brightly and squeezed her father's hand. But as Daniel looked at the mother and child, he realized something important. A hotel room would help tonight, but it wouldn't solve everything tomorrow. The thought stayed in his mind long after they helped the woman into a taxi. The next morning, inside the bright conference room of his company headquarters in Moscow, Daniel stood in front of the board of directors. The executives expected a presentation about profits and expansion plans. Instead, Daniel took a deep breath and said something completely unexpected. "Today," he began, "we're going to talk about a different kind of investment." Several weeks had passed since that freezing winter night in Moscow. The heavy snow still covered the sidewalks and rooftops, but the days had started to feel a little brighter. The streets were busy again with people wrapped in thick coats, rushing between shops, cafes, and offices. On a quiet Saturday afternoon, Daniel Carter walked slowly along the same street where everything had happened. Beside him skipped his daughter, Lily Carter, her pink winter coat and fluffy hat just as bright as before. "Papa, do you think the baby is warm now?" Lily asked as they approached the familiar corner. Daniel smiled softly. "I think so." After that night, Daniel had done much more than simply pay for a hotel room. The next morning, he had announced a new program at his company, one that would help struggling families find temporary housing, job opportunities, and support when life suddenly became difficult. At first, the board members had looked surprised. Some questioned the idea, but Daniel stood firm. Businesses don't just build profits, he had told them. They can build hope too. Now, as Daniel and Lily walked past the park bench where the homeless mother had once sat shivering in the snow, Lily slowed down. "Papa, the bench is empty." Daniel looked at it. The same streetlight stood above it, but the thin blankets and worried mother were gone. "Maybe that's a good sign," he said. Just then, Lily noticed something across the street. "Papa, look!" A small cafe had recently opened on the corner. Warm yellow lights glowed through the windows, and the smell of fresh bread and hot tea drifted out into the cold air. Inside, behind the counter, stood a familiar face. It was the same young woman they had helped weeks ago. Her hair was neatly tied back now, and she wore a simple cafe apron. In her arms, the baby looked healthy and warm, wrapped in soft blankets. When she saw Daniel and Lily through the window, her eyes widened with joy. She quickly stepped outside. "I've been hoping to see you again," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "The hotel helped me find this job. The owner let me work here and stay in a small room upstairs." Lily's face lit up. "The baby isn't cold anymore," she said happily. The woman laughed softly, rocking her child. Daniel knelt beside his daughter and whispered gently, "You know, Lily, you were the one who saved them." Lily thought about it for a moment, then shrugged with a small smile. I just didn't want the baby to freeze. And as the warm light from the cafe spilled onto the snowy street, Daniel realized something powerful. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can create the biggest change.